let's dive deep today. We're going to be talking about figuring out where to put your money, talking about investment sweet spots, those high-growth sectors. McKinsey, they actually call them arenas in their report. The next big arenas of competition. That's what it's called.
Yeah, I think what's really fascinating about this report is that it doesn't just list out potential arenas, but it actually breaks down the ingredients that actually create these investment powerhouses. It's like a recipe for success. And if you understand that recipe, you can start to see opportunities that maybe other people miss. I
love a good recipe, especially when we're talking potential profits.
Yeah.
So give me those ingredients. What is in this arena creation potion?
Well, first you need a major shakeup. Either in the business model itself or in the technology.
Yeah.
So think about how e-commerce really took over from brick and mortar retail, or how smartphones completely revolutionized how we communicate.
Yeah.
So these major shifts create fertile ground for new giants to emerge.
Okay, so disruption equals opportunity. Got it.
Yeah.
But a great idea is not enough. What else? What else goes into this potion?
Yeah, you need companies that are willing to bet big. I mean, really big, making massive and constantly escalating investments to try to, outmaneuver the competition. They're not just sitting back. They're constantly innovating and pushing the boundaries.
So it's like an arms race of innovation.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. We've got disruptive tech. We've got massive investments. What's the final ingredient? What makes this whole thing really bubble up?
Yeah, you need a market that's not just big, but growing fast. So that's where digitization and globalization play a huge role.
Yeah.
They're expanding the customer base and kind of amplifying the impact of all these trends, like throwing, fuel on the fire of growth.
Yeah, so it takes it to a whole other level. Now, this report doesn't just talk theory. It analyzes how all this played out in the real world over the last 20 years.
Exactly, yeah. So from 2005 to 2020, 12 arenas just absolutely dominated the landscape. These weren't just fleeting trends. They reshaped entire industries, created immense wealth. But here's the thing. Even within these winning arenas, the competition was brutal.
Wait, so you're telling me that just being in the right arena doesn't guarantee success? I don't know if I like that as an investor.
Well, that's why it's so important to understand the dynamics. So think about this. In 2005, only 4 of the top 20 companies by market cap actually managed to stay in the top 20 by 2024.
Wow.
That's some serious churn.
Yeah.
It just shows that even within a booming sector, you really need to be choosy about who you're betting on.
Point taken, point taken. So we know the recipe for success, but what does that actually tell us about where to invest today?
Well, that's where it gets really interesting. McKinsey has identified 18 potential arenas that could dominate in the coming decades, and they've grouped them into 3 categories: continuing arenas, spin-off arenas, and emergent arenas.
All right, I'm intrigued. Let's unpack those categories.
Yeah. Welcome back. Now that we know what makes these sectors tick, let's get into the specifics.
Yeah, my investor brain is ready. Where should we start?
Let's revisit electric vehicles. It's going to be dominant for years to come, but there's some nuances we need to unpack.
You mean it's not just about picking the next Tesla?
Well, Tesla's a major player, but the report highlights a potential disruption coming from Chinese EV manufacturers.
Yeah.
They're already making waves in their home market and expanding globally at an incredible pace.
Companies like BYD and NIO?
Absolutely. They're investing heavily in R&D, scaling up production rapidly, and they're laser-focused on things like cutting-edge battery technology and innovative features for a new generation of drivers. And let's not forget the entire EV ecosystem that's developing alongside these manufacturers.
Right, charging infrastructure and battery recycling?
Yeah. Companies developing fast-charging technologies, those are worth a look. As EV adoption explodes, that demand for convenient, efficient charging is only going to surge. And those who solve that charging bottleneck are going to be very well rewarded. And as batteries reach the end of their life cycle, recycling becomes crucial both for the environment and the economy.
It's like a circular economy is emerging around EVs, with opportunities at every stage of the battery life cycle. What about cloud services? We know there's still major growth potential there, but how do we find the most promising targets within such a huge arena?
The rise of AI is creating some really interesting opportunities within cloud services. Companies that provide cloud infrastructure specifically designed for AI workloads, those are going to benefit immensely from the increasing demand for computing power to train and run these complex AI models.
So companies like NVIDIA, with their powerful GPUs.
Exactly. NVIDIA is a key player, but don't overlook the cloud providers themselves like Google Cloud and Amazon Web Services. They're investing a ton in AI-optimized infrastructure and platform services, trying to become the go-to platforms for AI development.
It's like a race to become the backbone of the AI revolution. In this AI cloud space, it seems incredibly competitive. What should investors be watching to make smart decisions?
It's crucial to keep up with the latest developments in AI hardware and software. While the report suggests that a few large players will probably dominate, there could be shifts in market share, and nimble investors who can anticipate those shifts, they'll have an edge. Keep an eye on regional competitors and emerging trends like edge computing, which could shake things up even more.
So even in established arenas like cloud services, there's still room for disruption and big returns for those who can spot the signals early on. Okay, let's switch gears to something more futuristic. Space. We talked about satellite communications and Earth observation, but are those areas really ripe for investment, and can the average investor even get involved?
This is an emergent arena that's all about pushing the limits of what's possible, and it's capturing the imagination of investors and entrepreneurs alike. Satellite internet is already bringing connectivity to remote areas, and Earth's observation satellites are being used for everything from monitoring crops to tracking deforestation.
So areas where we could see significant growth and investment opportunities. But are we talking about betting on the next SpaceX, or are there more down-to-earth ways to get involved?
While investing directly in companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin might be challenging since they're not publicly traded, there's a growing number of publicly traded companies that are making waves in the space industry. For example, in the satellite communications space, you've got companies like Iridium Communications and Viasat. They provide satellite-based internet and communication services, and their stock performance is directly tied to the growth of the sector.
So you don't need a billionaire's bank account to get exposure to the space industry. What about these other fascinating areas like space tourism and even space-based manufacturing? Are those realistic investment targets, or are we still in the realm of science fiction?
Space tourism might seem like a luxury for the ultra-rich, and it is for now, but costs are coming down and demand is growing, so it's definitely a sector to keep an eye on. As for space-based manufacturing, it's still early days, but there are companies exploring the potential of space, like microgravity and vacuum, to create new materials and products that you just can't make on Earth.
The final frontier is becoming more accessible for explorers and investors. Okay, let's come back to Earth and talk about cybersecurity. It's becoming more and more critical as our lives go digital. But with all the talk about cyber attacks, it's hard to know where to focus as an investor.
You're right. Cybersecurity is vast and constantly changing. It's not just firewalls and antivirus software anymore. It includes threat detection, incident response, data encryption, identity management, a whole range of solutions.
So there are opportunities for companies specializing in all these different aspects of cybersecurity. But how do we know which ones are going to grow the fastest and offer the best returns?
The report highlights the increasing importance of AI and machine learning in cybersecurity. These AI-powered solutions can detect and respond to threats more effectively than humans, and they can identify patterns that we might miss.
So companies like CrowdStrike and Darktrace are the ones to watch. They're already using AI in their platforms.
They're definitely at the forefront and will likely benefit from the growing demand. But like any rapidly evolving field, you got to stay informed about new players and emerging technologies. Things change quickly.
It's like an arms race between the good guys and the bad guys, with AI becoming the weapon of choice. Okay, let's talk about batteries. We know the demand is growing as the world electrifies, but where are the best investment opportunities within the sector?
As we move to a more electric future, high-performance batteries are going to be essential, and everyone's racing to develop new battery technologies. But the investment opportunities go beyond just the batteries themselves. Think about battery management systems. They're crucial for safety optimizing charging and discharge and extending battery life.
Battery management systems. That's not something I've thought much about. It sounds like a hidden but vital part of the battery revolution.
Exactly. They're like the brains of the battery, making sure it operates efficiently and safely. And as we move to a world powered by batteries, these systems will become even more critical.
And what about battery recycling? Is that a viable investment area, or is it too early?
It's definitely promising, and the timing is perfect. As we get more electric vehicles and battery-powered devices, we'll need to recycle those batteries to recover valuable materials and reduce waste.
It's another example of a circular economy developing around these new technologies, creating multiple layers of investment opportunities. So there are opportunities across the entire battery life cycle, from mining to manufacturing, managing performance, and then recycling.
You got it. The battery revolution is creating a multifaceted investment landscape, and those who understand how all the pieces fit together, they're in the best position to capitalize on that growth.
This is a lot to take in, but I'm starting to understand why batteries are such a hot investment arena. What about some of the other arenas we've identified?
Let's talk about modular construction. I know you were a bit skeptical before, but I think it has the potential to be a real game changer, both in how we build and how we invest.
I'm willing to keep an open mind. You mentioned speed, efficiency, and customization, but I'm still not sure I see it as a truly dominant investment arena.
I get it. It might seem like a traditional industry, but modular construction offers a lot of advantages over traditional methods. Remember, disruption often comes from unexpected places.
Okay, remind me, what makes modular construction so potentially disruptive? What should investors be watching for?
It all comes down to efficiency and scalability. By building components off-site, you reduce waste, speed up construction, and create more customizable designs. This makes it really attractive as housing costs rise and the demand for sustainable building practices grows.
So it's like building with Legos, but on a massive scale.
That's a good analogy. And while the idea might seem simple, the technology behind it is getting really sophisticated. Companies are incorporating advanced materials, robotics, and software to optimize design and manufacturing.
Okay, I'm starting to see the appeal, but are there really enough companies in this space to create a big investment arena?
There are more and more companies specializing in modular construction, and the report highlights the potential for traditional construction companies and tech companies to invest and disrupt the industry. It's a really interesting convergence of old and new, and those who can bridge that gap are likely to be the big.
Hey there, listeners. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the future of markets, take a moment to support the show. Hit that like button, share this episode with fellow investors and market enthusiasts, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an update. Thanks for tuning in.
Winners.
It's not just building with modules. It's about using tech to make the whole process more efficient, sustainable, and responsive to market demands. What companies are leading the charge?
Unfortunately, Katerra, a high-profile player, went bankrupt, which shows the risks that come with any new industry. But other companies like Spender and Full Stack Modular are doing well. They're using technology to streamline design and manufacturing and create more sustainable and affordable buildings.
So both successes and failures, which is typical in any disruptive sector, what will determine whether modular construction really takes off?
Government incentives and regulations are a big factor. Some cities and countries are already offering incentives for modular construction, and as building codes get stricter, modular construction could become even more attractive.
So it's a combination of market demand, regulatory pressure, and technological innovation.
Exactly. And the benefits are hard to ignore. It's faster, cheaper, and more sustainable, all of which aligns with the global focus on housing shortages and climate change.
All right, I'm adding modular construction to my list of potential investment arenas. What other exciting opportunities are out there?
Let's dive into industrial and consumer biotechnology, an arena that's often overlooked but has huge potential to transform industries and create tons of wealth.
Biotechnology, that's a pretty broad term. What does it actually include, and how should investors think about it?
It's a fascinating and rapidly evolving space. We're talking about everything from alternative proteins like lab-grown meat and plant-based alternatives to personalized medicine and bio-based materials.
So using biological processes to create new products and solutions that address the world's challenges.
Exactly. The possibilities are huge. We talked about lab-grown meat, but there are also companies developing bio-based plastics and textiles and new types of fertilizers and pesticides that could revolutionize agriculture.
Harnessing the power of nature to create a more sustainable and innovative future. And with all the focus on climate change and resource scarcity, it seems like this arena is going to explode. What are the trends driving that growth, and where are the best investment opportunities?
The growing global population and the need for more sustainable food production are major drivers. Resources are becoming scarce, and the environmental impact of traditional agriculture is becoming more apparent, so the demand for alternative proteins and bio-based solutions is only going to increase.
That makes sense. But what about personalized medicine? How does that fit in, and is it a realistic investment for the average person?
Personalized medicine is about using biotechnology to develop treatments based on your genes and lifestyle, moving away from a one-size-fits-all approach to healthcare. And while it sounds futuristic, advances in gene editing and other biotechnologies are making it a reality.
The future of healthcare is going to be very personalized. What companies are leading this, and what should investors look for when evaluating them?
Companies like Illumina and CRISPR Therapeutics are developing gene editing technologies and targeted therapies. They're at the forefront. When evaluating these companies, you need to look at their scientific expertise, their intellectual property portfolio, and their clinical trial results. These are all key indicators of their potential.
So it's not just about betting on a cool new technology. You have to understand the science and the company's ability to translate that science into solutions.
Exactly. Biotechnology is complex, and it's important to invest in companies that have a solid scientific foundation and a clear path to bringing their products to market.
I'm adding industrial and consumer biotechnology to my watch list, but I'll definitely do my homework first. What other potential arenas should we be paying attention to?
Let's talk about nuclear fission power plants.
Nuclear power. Given the safety concerns and the nuclear waste, it seems like a risky bet. Is this really an arena worth considering?
I understand the concerns. Nuclear power has a complicated history, but we have to remember that it's a carbon-free source of energy. And with the need to address climate change, it's being reconsidered, both by governments and investors.
So it's about weighing the risks and benefits and understanding how new technologies could address those risks.
Exactly. New technologies like small modular reactors, or SMRs, are being developed, and they address some of the safety and cost concerns that come with traditional nuclear plants.
So not your grandfather's nuclear power. What are the advantages of these SMRs, and what are the investment implications?
SMRs are smaller, more modular, and potentially safer than traditional reactors. They can also be built faster and cheaper, making them attractive for countries looking to add clean energy to their grids.
Is there really enough happening in this arena to make it a viable investment? There seems to be a lot of resistance to nuclear power.
You're right. The political landscape is a major factor. The report says that nuclear fission power plants could be worth $65 to $150 billion by 2040, but only if they overcome regulatory hurdles and gain public acceptance.
Potential and challenges. What companies are leading the development of SMRs, and what should investors look for when evaluating them?
Companies like TerraPower and NuScale Power are developing SMRs that are generating a lot of interest. When you're looking at these companies, it's important to consider their technological expertise, their regulatory approvals, and their partnerships with governments and utilities. Those are key indicators of whether they can actually make money.
So it's high risk, high reward, and requires a lot of research.
Exactly. Investing in nuclear power isn't for everyone, but for those who believe in it and are willing to navigate the complexities it could pay off.
We've covered a lot today, from EVs and cloud services to biotechnology and nuclear power. I feel like an expert on the arenas of tomorrow.
You're getting there. And remember, it's not just about identifying the arenas, but also understanding the specific investment opportunities within them.
Right. We need to look at the companies, the technologies, the trends, and figure out how to turn that knowledge into actual investments.
Exactly. And that's what we'll be doing in the next part of our deep dive. We're going to get into the details of specific investment opportunities and talk about strategies for navigating these complex and dynamic markets. Get ready to put these insights into action.
All right, welcome back to the final part of our deep dive. We've explored so many potential investment areas: EVs, cloud services, biotechnology, even nuclear power. Now, how do we actually put all this knowledge into action?
Right. That's the big question. We've laid the groundwork, but now it's time to actually put it all into practice. Investing in emerging arenas, well, it's always risky, but you can tilt the odds in your favor by understanding those key trends, finding the right companies, and being strategic.
Okay, let's get tactical. Let's start with electric vehicles. We talked about those Chinese EV manufacturers and the potential disruption they could bring. How can investors capitalize on that, and what should we be watching for?
One option is to invest directly in those companies, like BYD and NIO. They're both publicly traded, they've shown great growth, but always do your research. Investing in foreign companies, well, it can be complicated. There's always a chance of political or regulatory changes that could affect how much money you make.
Good point. Any other ways to invest in EVs without that extra complexity of foreign markets?
Absolutely. Look beyond the car makers themselves. Think about the companies that are part of that EV ecosystem, like the companies developing charging infrastructure, battery management systems, recycling technologies. They're essential for the growth of the whole industry.
So finding the companies that are making the ED revolution happen behind the scenes.
Yeah.
What companies come to mind?
Well, in the charging space, you've got ChargePoint and EVgo. They're building out networks of fast charging stations all over the US and Europe, and their growth is tied to the demand for EV charging.
Makes sense. And what about those battery management systems and recycling? Any companies there you're watching?
For battery management systems, Analog Devices and Texas Instruments are in a good spot to benefit. They provide those chips and software that control battery performance, keep them safe, and make them last longer.
So they're the brains behind the electric revolution.
Exactly.
And what about battery recycling? It seems so important for both the environment and the economy.
Absolutely. As we get more electric vehicles, the need for recycling is just going to skyrocket. And that creates a huge opportunity for companies that can develop efficient and cost-effective recycling tech. Redwood Materials and Lifecycle are two to watch. They're figuring out how to recover those valuable materials from old batteries to create a more sustainable battery economy.
So many opportunities for investors who believe in the EV revolution, both within the car industry and in the broader ecosystem. Okay, what about cloud services? We talked about AI being so important. How can investors get in on that, and what should they keep in mind?
One way is to invest in the companies that are building the infrastructure for AI. Those are companies like NVIDIA. Their GPUs are crucial for AI. And then cloud providers like Google Cloud and Amazon Web Services, they're all pouring money into AI-optimized infrastructure and platforms.
So they're trying to become the foundation of the AI world.
Yep. And it's a super competitive space, so you got to stay on top of the latest developments in AI hardware and software. You need to find the companies that are pushing boundaries, not just keeping up.
Okay, let's go to space. We've talked about the potential for growth in satellite communications, Earth observation, even space tourism. But is this something that's even accessible to everyday investors?
Investing directly in companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin can be tough because they're not publicly traded. But there are more and more publicly traded companies that are making a splash in the space industry.
What companies are making space investable for regular people?
In satellite communications, there's Iridium Communications and Viasat. They provide satellite-based internet and communications, and their stock is tied to the growth of that sector, which is booming because of the need for connectivity in remote areas and the growth of the Internet of Things.
Interesting. And what about Earth observations? It seems like there's so much you can do with the data from those satellites.
There is. Companies like Planet Labs and Maxar Technologies, they run these constellations of satellites that are collecting and analyzing data about our planet. That data is used for everything from monitoring crops and forests to giving intel to governments and businesses.
So you don't need to be a billionaire to invest in space. All right, back to Earth now, and let's talk about cybersecurity. It's such a hot topic with all the cyber attacks we hear about, but it's also a huge and confusing world. How can investors make smart decisions in this space and not get lost?
You're right, it's always changing, which makes it tough for investors. One way is to spread your investments across different cybersecurity companies instead of trying to pick just one winner. So that could mean companies focusing on threat detection, incident response, data encryption, or identity management. You'd get exposure to the whole cybersecurity world.
Spread the risk.
Exactly. Think about the size and maturity of the companies, too. Big players like Palo Alto Networks and Fortinet, they're stable and they have a good track record.
Yeah.
But they might not grow as fast as smaller companies.
So it's that classic trade-off between stability and potential for growth.
Yep. Smaller high-growth companies like CrowdStrike and Zscaler could really take off, but there's more risk. Find what works for you and how much risk you're willing to take.
Makes sense. Okay, let's talk batteries again. Demand is only going up as the world electrifies. But how can investors ride that wave, and what should we be looking out for?
Like many of the areas we've talked about, you can approach batteries in a few different ways. You could invest in the companies actually making the batteries. Tesla, Panasonic, LG Chem, those are the big ones.
Right, the big names. But we also talked about looking beyond the manufacturers themselves. What other opportunities are there in that battery world?
It's a really complex ecosystem with lots of interconnected industries. You have the battery management systems companies like Analog Devices and Texas Instruments. Then there's the recycling companies like Redwood Materials and Lifecycle. And don't forget the companies that are mining the raw materials that go into those batteries.
So many different pieces of the puzzle. What are the big trends that investors should be watching?
Definitely keep an eye on the race to create new battery tech. Solid-state batteries, for example, they have the potential to completely change the game. Higher energy density, faster charging, improved safety.
It sounds like the battery industry is on fire with innovation.
Yeah.
Okay, what about modular construction? We talked about it disrupting the traditional building industry, but how can investors actually get involved, and what should they look for?
It's still a pretty young industry, so there aren't as many investment opportunities yet compared to those bigger arenas. But there are publicly traded companies involved, and we'll probably see more as it grows.
Any examples of publicly traded companies in modular construction?
We mentioned Skender and Full Stack Modular earlier. They're really embracing technology to improve their designs and manufacturing processes and create more sustainable and affordable buildings. And then there are bigger companies like Lennar and Toll Brothers that are using modular construction more and more in their home building.
So a mix of newcomers and traditional companies who are getting on board with this new approach. What could really make this industry take off?
The global housing shortage is a big driver. We need to build more homes faster, and modular construction is a good solution. Plus, building codes are getting stricter, especially about sustainability, so modular construction will probably become even more popular.
Okay, let's move on to something really transformative. Industrial and consumer biotechnology. So much potential there, from alternative proteins to personalized medicine. How can investors wrap their heads around such a complex and fast-changing field?
Biotechnology is fascinating, but it can be a lot to take in, especially if you're new to it. One way is to focus on just one part of biotech that interests you.
So instead of trying to be an expert on everything, just pick one area and go deep.
Exactly. So if you're excited about alternative proteins, you could invest in companies like Beyond Meat and Impossible Foods. They're creating those plant-based meat alternatives. Or if personalized medicine is more your thing, you could look at companies like Illumina and CRISPR Therapeutics. They're at the forefront of gene editing and targeted therapies.
So many possibilities in biotech. What should investors think about when they're evaluating these companies?
Always do your research. Understand how the business works. But with biotech, it's extra important to look beyond the hype and understand the science behind the company.
Do we need to become scientists to invest in this?
It helps. You don't need a PhD, but understand the basics of what they're doing. Look at their scientific team, their patents, and their clinical trial results. Those are the things that will tell you if they have a chance of succeeding.
That's a great tip. What about biotech ETFs or mutual funds? Are those good options for people who want to get into biotech but don't want to pick individual stocks?
Those are great options. ETFs and mutual funds that you spread your investment across a bunch of different biotech companies, so you lower your risk and get in on the growth of the whole sector. And you can find ones that focus on specific areas like genomics, CRISPR, or personalized medicine.
Last but not least, let's talk about nuclear fission power plants. New nuclear technologies could help us fight climate change, but is this a realistic investment for regular people?
Nuclear power can be a tough one. It's a very regulated industry, and politics and public opinion play a big role. But there are some publicly traded companies developing new nuclear technologies.
Yeah.
Especially those small modular reactors, or SMRs.
What are some of those companies and what should we look for?
Companies like TerraPower and NuScale Power, they're developing SMRs that are meant to be safer, more efficient, and cheaper than the old nuclear plants. When you're researching these companies, look at their tech, their regulatory approvals, and their partnerships with governments and utility companies. That'll tell you if they have a real shot.
So lots of potential, but also lots of challenges.
For sure. Nuclear power is not for everyone. You need to really weigh the risks and the potential rewards.
Okay, we've covered so much ground today. All those potential investment arenas and specific strategies to help you capitalize on these trends. Any final thoughts for investors who are looking ahead and trying to make sense of it all?
Well, the future is full of possibilities. Technology is changing so fast, and that means tons of opportunities for investors who are ready to embrace that change and think outside the box.
But it's not just about following the latest trends. It's about understanding the technology in the market and making smart decisions.
Exactly. Investing in these new areas is always risky, but you can improve your chances of success by diversifying your investments, staying informed, and being strategic.
Great advice. Well, I think we've covered it all today. The arenas of tomorrow, specific investment opportunities, and actionable strategies for navigating these exciting new markets.
It's been a great conversation. Remember, the future is in our hands. We can use our investments to grow our wealth and build a more sustainable, innovative, and prosperous world.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for joining us today, and happy investing, everyone.